I found the condom under the driver's seat of Emily's car. Not in the wrapper. Not hidden away. Used. I wasn't looking for it. I was reaching for one of Ethan's missing soccer cleats. Emily had borrowed the car the day before for a work meeting. I guess it ended with more than just paperwork. I held the damn thing between two fingers, staring at it like it might dissolve if I blinked too hard. Emily's car smelled faintly of vanilla. Her air freshener dangled from the rearview mirror, swaying lightly as the breeze from the open door hit it. I sat there for a long time, condom still in hand, wondering how the hell I missed it. The late nights. The sudden gym trips when she didn't even break a sweat. Her phone buzzing constantly, flipped face down on the counter. I should have seen it. The front door opened, and Emily's voice rang out from the house. "Matt, you out here?" I slid the condom into my pocket and slammed the car door shut. "Yeah, found Ethan's cleat." I called back, holding it up. She stepped outside, phone in hand, hair pulled back in that way she always did when she thought she looked too cute to be questioned. "Oh, good. I told you it was under the seat." I smiled, watching her. "Yep, right where you said." Emily laughed, leaning against the doorframe. "You okay?" "You're staring." I walked toward her, slipping my hand into my pocket, feeling the condom's presence like a loaded gun. "I'm great," I replied, stepping into the house. And for the first time, I wasn't lying. Emily sat on the couch, legs crossed, scrolling through her phone like she didn't have a care in the world. I leaned against the kitchen counter, watching her silently. "Busy day at work yesterday?" I asked casually, tossing Ethan's cleat onto the table. Emily barely glanced up. "Yeah, meetings ran long. You know how it is." I smiled. "Yeah, I bet they did." Her eyes flicked to me, narrowing slightly. "What's with the tone?" I pulled the used condom from my pocket and set it on the table between us. The air shifted instantly. Emily's face drained of color, her hand tightening around her phone. "What the fuck is that?" I crossed my arms, leaning forward. "That," I said calmly, "was under your seat." Emily's eyes darted to the condom, then back to me. She swallowed hard but forced a thin, fake laugh. "Jesus, Matt. You think that's mine?" Maybe Ethan's friends were messing around in the car. "You still to here? Really? You're blaming a bunch of kids for leaving a used rubber under your seat?" Emily shrugged, but I could see the panic flickering behind her eyes. "I don't know how it got there. Maybe it's old." "Oh!" I raised an eyebrow. "I vacuumed your car last week. Care to explain how it magically appeared after your work meeting?" She rolled her eyes, shifting in her seat. "You're being ridiculous. Why would I cheat on you in my own car?" I laughed coldly. "Good question. Maybe you're just lazy. Or maybe you thought I was too stupid to check." Emily sat up straighter, tossing her phone onto the couch. "Matt, stop. You're reading way too much into this." I took a slow step toward her, letting the silence drag out. "You know," I said, lowering my voice, "you'd be better at lying if you didn't look so guilty right now." Her jaw clenched. "You're seriously accusing me of cheating over some random condom? That's insane." I smirked. "Not as insane as you thinking I'm just going to let this go." Emily's eyes hardened, but she didn't argue. Because she knew. She was caught. Emily sat frozen, eyes locked on the condom, like it might explode if she blinked. "Matt," she said slowly, choosing her words like she was defusing a bomb. "I'm not cheating. I don't know how it got there." I stepped closer, resting my hand on the back of the couch. "So you're telling me this just appeared under your seat?" Her lips pressed into a thin line. "Yes." I smiled faintly. "Cool." Without another word, I walked to the trash can, popped the lid, and tossed the condom in. Emily blinked, surprised. "That's it?" I shrugged. "Sure. I mean, you said you're not cheating, right?" She hesitated, sensing the shift. "Right?" I nodded, stepping toward the back door. "Good. I believe you." Emily watched me carefully. "Where are you going?" "Gonna mow the lawn," I replied casually, grabbing my keys. "Oh, and while I'm at it, I might stop by Greg's shop." Her expression faltered. "Greg's?" I smirked. "Yeah, you know, the place where they install those nifty little GPS trackers under the dashboard. Just for peace of mind." Emily shot off the couch. "Matt, don't." I raised an eyebrow. "Why not?" "I'm not accusing you of anything. This is just routine." She stepped in front of me, arms crossed. That's insane. You're not putting a fucking tracker in my car. Why not? I leaned in, eyes locked on hers. Something you don't want me to find? Her face reddened. I said no. I chuckled darkly. Relax, babe. If you're not cheating, you've got nothing to worry about. Emily's breath hitched, but she forced herself to hold eye contact. You're being paranoid, she muttered, her voice cracking just enough for me to catch it. I tilted my head. Am I? She didn't answer. I brushed past her, grabbing the lawnmower handle and rolling it outside without another word. Let her sit with that. An hour later, Emily's car wasn't in the driveway. I wasn't surprised. She ran, but I wasn't chasing her. Not yet. Emily didn't come home until late that night. I was sitting in the living room, lights dimmed, watching the front door like a predator waiting for prey. When I heard the soft click of the lock turning, I stayed perfectly still. The door creaked open, and Emily slipped inside, moving carefully like she thought I'd be asleep. Her eyes flicked toward the couch and froze the second she saw me. Oh, she muttered, keys jingling nervously in her hand. You're still up? I smiled faintly. Couldn't sleep. You, she shrugged, try to play it cool. Amanda wanted to grab drinks. We lost track of time. I stared at her, saying nothing. Her eyes shifted away. You can stop looking at me like that. I told you, nothing's going on. I leaned forward, elbows resting on my knees. Sure, drinks with Amanda. Huh. Emily's eyes flicked to her purse, like she wanted to check her phone, but knew it'd be too obvious. Yeah, she said quickly. Why? I let the silence stretch, enjoying the way she squirmed under the weight of it. You should have told Amanda to wipe the fog off your windows before you came home, I said casually. Her face went pale. What? I stood, stepping closer until I towered over her. Next time, crack the window. Jason's hands leave prints. Emily's mouth opened slightly, but no words came out. For the first time, she didn't have a lie ready. You were at his place, I said flatly. Don't bother denying it. Her lips pressed together, fists clenching at her sides. Matt, don't. I cut her off, voice cold. She blinked, swallowing hard. It's not what you think. I laughed bitterly. Yeah? You sure about that? Emily's breathing quickened. I could see her scrambling for an escape, but there wasn't one. Not this time. I leaned down, brushing her hair behind her ear. You're done lying, I whispered. I'm taking everything. Her eyes widened. Matt, wait. I stepped back, smirking. Get some rest, Emily, I said, heading upstairs. You'll need it for court. She stood frozen in the entryway, watching me disappear down the hall. Emily didn't sleep in our bed that night. I heard her downstairs, pacing until well past midnight. Every so often, I'd catch the faint sound of her phone buzzing, followed by hushed whispers. Jason, no doubt. Let them panic together. By morning, she was already gone. No explanation. Just an empty closet space where half her clothes used to be. Good. One step closer to getting her out of my life for good. I wasn't wasting time. That afternoon, I met with my lawyer, Tom Jenkins. A no-bullshit guy in his 50s with a sharp tongue and a reputation for leaving cheating spouses in financial ruin. He leaned back in his chair, adjusting his glasses as I laid out the situation. So let me get this straight, Tom said, flipping through the notes. You found a used condom in her car, caught her sneaking around, and she's been running to the neighbor's house like it's a second home? I nodded. Tom grinned. This is open and shut, Matt. Judges love cases like this, especially with evidence. I slid the flash drive across the table. Footage from the security camera by our driveway, I said. She's been parking down the street and walking to his place. Timestamps and everything. Tom chuckled under his breath. Jesus. She didn't even try to be discreet. She thought I wouldn't find out. Well, she's about to learn the hard way, Tom muttered, setting the flash drive aside. He tapped his pen against the folder. Here's the deal. We'll file immediately. Given the evidence, you can push for full custody of Ethan and keep the house. She'll walk away with nothing but the clothes she took. I nodded. Do it. Tom leaned forward, lowering his voice slightly. I'll make sure she doesn't see this coming. Don't mention a word to her until we serve the papers. Fine by me, I said, standing. She made her choices. Now she lives with them. Emily finally showed up later that evening. She tried to sneak in quietly, but the second the door creaked, I was waiting. She froze in the entryway, carrying 2 duffel bags like she was ready to bolt at any second. "Where have you been?" I asked, casually sipping from my glass of bourbon. Emily shifted, forcing a smile. "Amanda's. I needed space to think." I smirked. "Right? Did Jason help you think too?" Her face hardened. "Matt, you're not funny." I set the glass down, locking eyes with her. "I'm not trying to be." Emily's gaze flickered to the stairs. "I'm gonna shower. We can talk later." I let her pass. She had no idea the paperwork was already being prepared. 2 days later, Tom called. "She's been served," he said, sounding pleased. "Her lawyer reached out, but they're scrambling." I smiled, pacing in the backyard. "Good." Tom laughed. "By the way, she's already tried calling 3 times. I braced for the meltdown. "She can call all she wants. I'm not picking up. Smart man." We ended the call, and I headed inside. Sure enough, Emily's number lit up my phone twice before she finally left a voicemail. I let it sit there. I didn't need to hear whatever bullshit excuse she'd cooked up this time. Let her sweat. Emily showed up that night. I heard her car pull into the driveway fast, tires screeching slightly as she parked. Moments later, the door swung open with a loud bang. "Matt!" She stormed into the living room, fists clenched at her sides. "What the fuck is this?" I didn't look up from the TV. "Divorce papers." She threw them onto the coffee table, her hands shaking. "You're actually doing this?" she hissed, eyes burning into me. "You didn't even tell me. Just blindsided me like a coward?" I smiled faintly, finally meeting her glare. "Cowards cheat on their husbands in their own car, Emily." Her nostrils flared, but she forced herself to stay calm. "You can't do this. We can fix things." I laughed bitterly. "Fix what exactly? The part where you were fucking Jason while I was at work? Or the part where you lied every single time I asked you about it?" Emily crossed her arms tightly, her nails digging into her sleeves. "You can't prove anything." I grabbed the flash drive from the table, holding it between 2 fingers. "Want to bet?" Her eyes narrowed, flicking to the drive. "What is that?" "Security footage," I said calmly. "Every time you parked around the corner and snuck into Jason's house. Timestamps, dates, all wrapped up in a neat little package for the court." Emily's confidence cracked, her posture stiffening. "You wouldn't," she whispered, but the tremble in her voice told me she knew better. "Oh, I would," I replied coldly. "I already did." She stepped forward, placing her hands on the table, leaning in close. "Think about Ethan," she hissed. I leaned back, folding my arms. "I am. That's why I'm filing for full custody." Emily's eyes widened. "Matt, you can't." I cut her off, my voice dropping to a growl. "A judge isn't going to side with the mother who was banging the neighbor while her kid was at school." Her mouth opened, but nothing came out. For the first time since this started, Emily looked genuinely afraid. She didn't sleep at the house that night. I watched from the window as she tossed a few things into her car and sped off, probably to Jason's or wherever else she had been slithering around. I let her go. She wasn't my problem anymore. The next morning, Jason's wife, Laura, showed up at my doorstep. I hadn't spoken to her since the day I sent her the video, but the second I opened the door, she smiled faintly. "Morning, Matt," she greeted, stepping inside without waiting for an invitation. I raised an eyebrow. "To what do I owe the pleasure?" Laura handed me an envelope, her smirk widening. "Just wanted you to know Jason got served his papers this morning." I opened the envelope, pulling out a copy of the divorce filing. I chuckled softly. "You didn't waste any time." "Why should I?" she said with a shrug. "If he wants to screw around with your wife, he can do it from a shitty motel room." I grinned, setting the papers aside. "Glad we're on the same page." Laura's eyes lingered on mine for a moment, her expression softening. "If you need a witness during the custody hearing," she added, "I'm more than happy to testify. Jason doesn't exactly have the best track record." I nodded. "I appreciate that." She hesitated at the door, her hand resting on the knob. "And Matt?" "Yeah, Emily's not going to stop. She'll fight this," Laura warned. "Make sure you're ready." I smiled coldly. Oh, I am. Emily showed up 2 days later. Not with anger this time. No stamping. No scouting. She walked in quietly, like she thought maybe if she acted small enough, I'd forget the last few weeks ever happened. I sat at the kitchen table, sipping coffee when she stepped inside. She lingered near the doorway, hands tucked in her jacket pockets. Matt, she started softly, like she was approaching a wild animal. Can we talk? I didn't bother looking up. We are talking. Emily shifted awkwardly, glancing toward the living room. Can we sit down? I'm sitting. Her eyes flicked to the chair across from me, but she didn't move toward it. Look, she sighed, running a hand through her hair. I've been thinking. About Ethan. About us. I raised an eyebrow, finally meeting her gaze. Now you're thinking about Ethan? She flinched but kept going. I made a mistake. I know that. But we can fix this. Maybe counseling or something. I leaned back in my chair, folding my arms. Counseling's not going to unfuck Jason, Emily. Her jaw clenched, but she forced a tight smile. You're enjoying this, aren't you? I shrugged. Maybe. She stepped closer, lowering her voice. You're willing to drag this through court? Waste thousands of dollars just to hurt me? I laughed under my breath. You think this is about money? Emily's eyes flashed with frustration, and there it was, the real her, poking through the cracks in the facade. I cheated, she snapped. But you're not innocent in this either, Matt. I cocked my head. Oh, enlighten me. She crossed her arms tightly. You were distant. You barely touched me. Half the time, you were at work, and the other half, you were glued to your phone. I smirked. You could have talked to me instead of letting Jason fuck you in the back seat of your car. Emily's face reddened, and for a second, I thought she might actually cry. Good. I'm fighting for full custody, I said coldly. The judge is going to hear every detail. About Jason. About the lies. And when they do, Ethan stays with me. Emily's lips parted slightly. Matt, you can't take him away from me. I leaned forward, eyes locking onto hers. You already did that yourself. Later that night, Emily texted me. Emily, we need to find a way to compromise. I stared at the message, letting the weight of it sink in. Me? There's no compromise. Her reply came almost immediately. Emily, I'll fight you, Matt. Don't think I won't. I smiled. Me? Then I'll bury you in court. She didn't respond after that. The next morning, Ethan asked why Mom wasn't coming home. I knelt down in front of him, brushing his hair back gently. Mom's staying somewhere else for a little while, buddy. But you and I? We're gonna have some fun. Ethan frowned, but nodded. Is she mad at you? I forced a smile. No. Sometimes adults just need space. He accepted that answer. For now. Emily would have her chance to explain, once the papers were signed and she was visiting him on my terms. Emily didn't just roll over and accept it. I knew she wouldn't. By the end of the week, I got an email from her lawyer. She was pushing for joint custody, claiming the affair had no bearing on her ability to parent. I laughed so hard I nearly spilled my coffee. Tom, my lawyer, was already 2 steps ahead. She really thinks the court's gonna buy that? He said over the phone, amusement in his voice. I've seen cases with less evidence swing in favor of the father. With the footage you gave me, she's already dead in the water. Good, I replied. Let's keep the pressure on. Tom chuckled. Oh, we will? Her lawyer's going to regret taking this case. Emily called that night. I debated ignoring it, but curiosity got the better of me. Matt, she said softly when I answered. Can we stop this? For Ethan's sake. I smirked. Is that what Jason told you to say? She inhaled sharply. This isn't about him. It was when you were riding him in your car. Silence. Emily's voice dropped, frustration bleeding through. I get it, okay? I fucked up, but dragging me through the mud isn't going to fix this. I leaned back on the couch, letting her squirm. It's not about fixing anything, Emily. It's about making sure you don't get to pretend to be the perfect mother while you're screwing around behind my back. Her breath hitched, but she recovered quickly. You're being vindictive. I smiled. Damn right I am. She paused, and I could practically hear the gears turning in her head, searching for something to use against me. Maybe I'll tell the court you were emotionally neglectful, she snapped. See how that plays out. I laughed coldly. Try it. I'll make sure every text you sent to Jason, every dirty message, every video, is played in court. Emily didn't respond right away. Finally, she sighed. I don't want to fight you, Matt. Then stop trying, I said flatly. She hung up without saying goodbye. The next morning, Tom called with news. Her lawyer reached out, he said, sounding almost disappointed. They're already offering a settlement. I raised an eyebrow. That was fast. She knows she's screwed. But they're hoping you'll agree to split custody if she waives spousal support. I smiled. Tell them no deal. Tom chuckled. You sure? We could wrap this up quick. She doesn't get a pass, I said firmly. I want Ethan full-time. Tom didn't argue. All right, let's drag this out. She'll break before we do. Emily showed up later that evening. She didn't come inside. Just stood on the porch, arms crossed, staring at the front door until I opened it. What? I asked, not bothering to hide the annoyance in my voice. Emily's eyes flicked toward the living room window, where Ethan was sitting, watching cartoons. You really want to take him away from me? She whispered, voice trembling. I stepped outside, pulling the door shut behind me. I'm not taking him away, I said quietly. You did that when you decided fucking Jason was more important than our family. Tears welled in her eyes, but I didn't care. Matt! I shook my head. It's too late, Emily. She wiped at her face quickly, masking the tears with frustration. Fine, but don't expect me to just disappear. I smirked. I don't expect you to disappear. I expect you to lose. Her lips pressed into a thin line, but she didn't argue. Emily turned and walked back to her car, driving away without another word. I watched her go, feeling nothing but satisfaction. 2 weeks later, we were in court. Emily sat at the opposite table, dressed like she was auditioning for a Hallmark movie, soft pastel blazer, hair neatly curled, wedding ring conspicuously absent. She kept glancing at me, like she was hoping for a moment of weakness. Some sign I backed down. I didn't. Tom leaned in, whispering, She looks nervous. She should be, I muttered. The judge, a stern woman in her late 50s, called us to order, and Emily's lawyer stood first. He spun the usual bullshit. How Emily was a devoted mother. How one mistake shouldn't define her ability to co-parent. I kept my expression blank, but inside, I was counting down the seconds. Then Tom stood, flashing that shark-like grin he was famous for. Your Honor, he started, stepping forward confidently. I have video evidence, text messages, and financial records showing Mrs. Hayes' pattern of deception and neglect of her family responsibilities, including proof that she was engaging in an extramarital affair, often while Mr. Hayes was working and their son was under his care. Emily's face drained of color. Her lawyer shifted nervously. Tom didn't stop. I have statements from neighbors confirming Mrs. Hayes' visits to the home of Mr. Jason Reynolds, often late at night and lasting several hours. I also have testimony from Mr. Reynolds' now estranged wife, confirming these encounters were not innocent. Emily's nails dug into the table, her eyes flicking between the judge and me, pleading silently. I didn't blink. Tom handed the judge a folder. As you'll see in the submitted evidence, Mr. Hayes is asking for full custody. Given the circumstances, we believe this is in the child's best interest. The judge skimmed through the documents, her expression unreadable. Emily's lawyer rose quickly. Your Honor, while we acknowledge the affair, Mrs. Hayes maintains a strong and loving relationship with her son. We ask the court to consider joint custody to ensure the child benefits from both parents. I almost laughed. The judge glanced at Emily. Mrs. Hayes, do you have anything to say for yourself? Emily stood slowly, smoothing the front of her blazer. Your Honor, she began, her voice soft but trembling, I regret my actions deeply. But I love my son. I've made mistakes, but that shouldn't cost me the chance to raise him. She glanced at me, eyes glassy. I believe Matt and I can find a way to co-parent peacefully. The courtroom was silent for a moment. Then the judge set the folder down. I've reviewed the evidence. Mr. Hayes, I'm granting you full custody. Mrs. Hayes, you will have visitation rights as outlined by Mr. Jenkins. Emily's knees buckled slightly, and she gripped the table to steady herself. Court adjourned. The gavel hit, And just like that, it was over. Emily caught me outside the courthouse steps. She stormed toward me, eyes blazing. "Are you happy now?" she snapped, shoving at my arm. I didn't move. "I am satisfied," he replied calmly. Tears welled in her eyes, but the anger was stronger. "You ruined my life, Matt." I met her glare, holding it until she faltered. "You did that yourself?" I said quietly. Emily stood there for a long moment, breathing hard like she was gearing up for another fight. But there wasn't one left to have. I turned, leaving her standing on the courthouse steps, broken and alone. Emily didn't call. She didn't text. For the first time in months, the house felt quiet, peaceful. Ethan adjusted faster than I expected. Kids are resilient like that. He asked about Emily a few times, and I gave him the simplest answer I could. Mom's staying somewhere else for a little while. That was enough for him. Emily's first visitation came 2 weekends later. She pulled into the driveway right on time, stepping out of her car in jeans and a sweater, trying to look composed. But her eyes gave her away, red and tired. She knelt down as Ethan came running out, wrapping her arms around him a little too tightly. I stayed on the porch, watching. After a few minutes, she glanced at me over his shoulder. "We'll be back by 6, she said softly. I nodded. "I'll be here." Emily lingered for a moment like she wanted to say more, but I turned and walked inside before she could. I wasn't giving her the satisfaction of small talk. By 5:50, Ethan was already home. Emily stayed in the car, watching from the driver's seat as he ran up the steps. "Had fun?" I asked, ruffling his hair. "Yeah. Mom took me to the zoo," he beamed. I smiled faintly. "Glad to hear it." As Ethan ran to the living room, I glanced out the window. Emily was still sitting in the driveway, gripping the steering wheel like it might keep her grounded. I knew she wouldn't leave until I came out. So I did. I leaned against the porch railing, arms crossed. "Something you need?" Emily rolled down the window, but she didn't look at me right away. "Ethan had a good time," she said quietly. "Good." Silence stretched between us. Finally, she looked up, her eyes glassy but defiant. "You really hate me that much?" I smirked. "I don't hate you, Emily. You're just not my problem anymore." She swallowed, blinking rapidly to keep the tears from spilling. "Is this how it's going to be?" she whispered. I shrugged. "You made your bed." Her grip tightened around the steering wheel, but she didn't argue. Instead, she nodded stiffly, rolling the window back up. I watched as she backed out of the driveway, disappearing down the street. That was how it stayed. Emily showed up every other weekend, all smiles for Ethan, but cold and distant toward me. It didn't bother me. She was the one living with the weight of her choices. I had my son, my house, and my peace, and that was all I needed. Thank you for listening this story to the end. Write your thoughts about it in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe. See you in the next videos.